What if I tell you that the secret to stopping aging after 45 isn't found in any laboratory or medical breakthrough, but in a psychological practice that I discovered through studying the human psyche? There's a hidden phase of life that begins around age 45, and those who understand it not only stop aging mentally and spiritually, but actually begin to reverse the psychological patterns that make us feel old, tired, and defeated. This isn't about positive thinking or surface-level motivation. This is about a deep transformation that I call the most important journey of human life. In this speech, you will discover the hidden practice that I describe as the key to eternal vitality, and why most people over 45 are doing exactly the opposite of what their soul needs to thrive. Listen carefully, because what you're about to learn could transform not just how you age, but how you live every remaining day of your life. I made a startling observation that changes everything we thought we knew about aging. I noticed that around age 45, life presents us with a choice. We can either continue living the same patterns we've always lived, slowly dying inside while our bodies follow suit, or we can embrace what I call the second half of life with completely different rules, different goals, and different sources of energy. I discovered that those who make this transition successfully don't just age gracefully, they seem to tap into a source of vitality that younger people cannot access. I call this transition the process of individuation, in which I describe it as the most important psychological development that happens after midlife. But here's what most people don't understand. Individuation isn't just about finding yourself. It's about connecting with the self, with a capital S, which I think is the divine spark within every human being. When this connection happens, people stop living from their ego's demands and start living from their soul's wisdom. The result isn't just inner peace, it's a transformation so profound that it affects every cell, every thought, and every relationship. The problem is that our culture teaches us exactly the wrong approach to aging. Society tells us that after 45, we should focus on maintaining what we have, holding on to our youth, and slowly accepting decline. I describe this as psychological poison. People who try to live the second half of life with the same values as the first half become depressed, anxious, and prematurely old. But those who learn to live by the deeper rules of the psyche experience a psychological rebirth that makes them more alive at 60 than they were at 30. The first half of life is about building the ego, establishing our place in the world, achieving success, and proving ourselves to others. This requires tremendous energy, but it's external energy focused on competition, acquisition, and social approval. Around age 45, I think this energy naturally begins to turn inward. Most people fight this transition trying to keep living like they're 25. But this inward turn is actually the soul calling us to a much deeper and more fulfilling way of existence. The hidden practice that I developed is active imagination combined with a relationship with the unconscious. This isn't meditation in the Eastern sense, and it isn't prayer in the religious sense. It's a specific psychological practice that allows people to tap into the creative and healing power of their own psyche. When people over 45 begin this practice regularly, they experience a renewal of energy that seems to come from an inexhaustible source. Active imagination involves sitting quietly and allowing images, thoughts, and even conversations to emerge from the unconscious mind. But I insist this isn't passive daydreaming. It's an active dialogue with the deeper layers of the psyche. I suggest people to engage with these images as if they were real, to ask them questions, to listen to their wisdom, and to integrate their messages into daily life. This practice connects people with what I call the collective unconscious, a source of wisdom and energy that transcends individual limitations. People who practice active imagination regularly seem to stop aging psychologically. They become more creative, more intuitive, and more alive to possibilities. They stop being driven by fear and start being guided by curiosity. They stop trying to control everything and start trusting the wisdom of their own psyche. Most importantly, they discover that the second half of life has its own unique form of energy that is actually more sustainable and more fulfilling than the energy of youth. But my most profound discovery is about what I call the shadow. I realized that by age 45, most people have spent decades rejecting parts of themselves, pushing down emotions, denying desires, and living according to what others expect. All of this rejected energy doesn't disappear. It accumulates in the shadow, and it literally drains our life force. One of the most powerful practices for renewal after 45 is shadow work, the process of reclaiming and integrating these rejected parts of ourselves. Shadow work isn't about becoming selfish or destructive, it's about becoming whole. When people begin to accept their anger, their sadness, their desires, and even their darkness, they suddenly have access to tremendous amounts of energy that had been locked away. I tell you, meeting people who have done this work and seem to glow with vitality, regardless of their chronological age, they have stopped fighting themselves and started working with the full spectrum of their humanity. I also discovered the importance of what I call the anima and animus, the feminine aspect in men and the masculine aspect in women. I found that after 45, people who learn to develop their opposite qualities experience a profound renewal. Men who have spent their lives being tough and competitive find new energy in embracing sensitivity, intuition, and care. Women who have spent their lives being nurturing and accommodating find new strength in embracing their power, directness, and independence. This isn't about changing personality, but about becoming more complete as human beings. The practice I recommend is simple but profound. Each day, spend time in dialogue with your inner opposite. Men, what does your inner feminine voice want to tell you? Women, what does your inner masculine voice want you to know? I found that this internal conversation opens up new sources of creativity, wisdom, and energy that people never knew they had. It's like discovering you have been living on half your psychological resources. I am fascinated by synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to guide us toward our destiny. I discovered that people who practice active imagination and shadow work begin to experience more synchronicities. It's as if the universe itself begins to support their growth and renewal. Paying attention to these synchronicities and following their guidance is another key to staying vital and alive after 45. Instead of forcing life to happen, we learn to dance with life as it unfolds. One of my most powerful insights is about the difference between having a life and being lived by life. I've observed that most people, especially after 45, fall into routines and patterns that drain their energy. They go through the motions without really living. But when people learn to listen to their psyche, to follow their genuine interests, and to trust their inner guidance, they begin to feel alive in a completely new way. They stop having a life and start being lived by life itself. I describe this as connecting with the transcendent function, the part of the psyche that bridges conscious and unconscious, personal and universal. When people access this function, they seem to tap into a source of wisdom and energy that is both deeply personal and transpersonal. They make decisions that seem to come from a higher intelligence. They find meaning in experiences that used to seem random. They feel connected to something larger than themselves, while simultaneously becoming more authentically themselves. The practice of connecting with the transcendent function involves holding the tension of the opposites. Instead of choosing between logic and intuition, between thinking and feeling, between action and reflection, I think people should hold both sides and wait for a third option to emerge. This practice not only leads to better decisions, but also generates tremendous psychological energy. It's like learning to use the full capacity of the mind instead of just half of it. Now, let's emphasize the importance of the personal myth. People over 45 who discover their own unique story, their own meaning and purpose, experience a profound renewal of vitality. This isn't about finding your passion in the popular sense. It's about discovering the deeper pattern and meaning of your individual life. I'm telling people to look at their lives as if they were reading a myth or a fairy tale. What is the hidden story? What is trying to emerge? What is the soul trying to accomplish through this particular lifetime? Creating and living your personal myth is one of the most powerful anti-aging practices available. When people connect with their deeper purpose, they stop feeling like victims of time and start feeling like participants in an unfolding story. They begin to see challenges as part of their hero's journey rather than as evidence of decline. They find energy and meaning that no external source can provide. I noticed that people who successfully transition into the second half of life also develop a relationship with death. This isn't morbid thinking, but rather a profound acceptance that gives them freedom to truly live. When people stop denying death and start seeing it as a natural part of the larger cycle, they paradoxically become more alive. They stop wasting energy on trivial concerns and start focusing on what really matters. They develop a cosmic perspective that makes daily problems seem less overwhelming. The practice I recommend is to spend time regularly contemplating the temporary nature of all things, including our own lives. Instead of causing despair, I discovered this practice actually generates tremendous appreciation for the present moment and tremendous courage to live authentically. People who do this work seem to develop an inner stillness and strength that makes them magnetic to others and resistant to the fears that drain most people's energy. I also discovered the importance of the religious attitude. Though I am careful to distinguish this from organized religion, people over 45 who develop a sense of reverence, mystery, and connection to something greater than themselves experience profound renewal. This could manifest as traditional spirituality, but I think it is more often a direct personal experience of the sacred in daily life. The practice I recommend is to approach each day with the attitude that you are participating in something sacred and mysterious. Instead of seeing life as a mechanical process to be optimized, begin to see it as a sacred story in which you play an important role. This shift in perspective alone is enough to transform people's energy and vitality. They stop being bored by life and start being amazed by it. Perhaps my most radical discovery is that the second half of life has its own developmental tasks that are completely different from the first half. While the first half is about building and achieving, the second half is about deepening and becoming. While the first half is about doing, the second half is about being. While the first half is about getting, the second half is about giving. People who understand this transition and embrace it experience a psychological spring, a renewal of life force that seems to come from connecting with eternal patterns. My message to anyone over 45 is both challenging and hopeful. What I'm saying is, you are not declining, you are transforming. You are not losing your youth, you are gaining your wisdom. You are not running out of time, you are entering the most important phase of human development. But this transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires consciousness, practice, and courage. The hidden practice that I discovered combines all of these elements into a daily approach to life. Begin each day with active imagination, spending 10 to 15 minutes in dialogue with your unconscious. Practice shadow work by acknowledging and integrating the parts of yourself you've been rejecting. Develop your opposite qualities by consciously embracing the feminine or masculine aspects you've neglected. Pay attention to synchronicities and follow their guidance. Hold the tension of opposites and wait for the transcendent function to emerge. Live your personal myth by connecting with the deeper meaning of your life. Develop a relationship with death that frees you to truly live. And approach each day with the reverence that comes from knowing you are participating in something sacred. I can assure you that people who commit to this practice will not just age well. They will discover that the second half of life can be the most creative, most meaningful, and most alive period of their entire existence. The energy of youth comes from the body and fades with time, but the energy I described comes from the soul and actually increases with age and wisdom.